the Broncos put Russell Wilson on the shelf, and I actually think this is wild because they put him on the shelf about a physical in March, about money that's 2 years down the line. Like, it just feel like they don't want that man to be their quarterback no more.
They don't want that man to be a quarterback, and they are not even strategic in how they are going to move on from that man being their quarterback. The only way that you can possibly realistically move on from, even if they cut him, they haven't moved on from him because they're committed financially up until a certain point. But what blew my mind, and I guess I should be more appalled at like the unprofessionalness of all of it, but what blew my mind was just the sheer stupidity of it. You don't have no leverage. So you like, all right, hey man, we gonna make you not work for this money. What? What? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. Like, hey, if you don't let us take this money from you, we gonna make you come in here and not do nothing and get this money. Like, the hell's that supposed to work? What you need to do is actually rehabilitate him or his image and his playing ability to the point where you could convince somebody else that he is worth taking, because ain't nobody giving no money back.
No, they was trying to appeal to the competitor in him. Is that what it was? Like they was trying to appeal to his competitive spirit.
That's ridiculous. That ain't gonna work. They needed to figure something. They should have sent somebody. They need to get some dirt on them. Like that, you don't have no leverage. Your leverage right now is don't worry about it. We gonna keep sending you these checks. You better allow us to stop sending you these checks, or we gonna make you not get hit by 300-pound defensive linemen.
But then the next part of it was Russ was like, "Nah, I'm good," and then they kept trotting him out there. All right? They kept trotting them out there until because that tells you a lot. They kept trotting them out there until they knew that they basically knew they weren't going to the playoffs. Like the odds were so slim going into last week. And that's when they went ahead and they made the call to get him out of there. And they won the game with Stidham. And I don't know if Stidham is better or not. I mean, I have not watched them that much this year. And so I looked at his numbers and looked at like how many points they were scoring. And it looked to be, even without watching the games, what it looks like when a team is handcuffing its quarterback, right? Where they are not really asking him to do but so much. That's what seemed to be the case. And a guy that used to average 8.5 yards an attempt is not doing anything close to that anymore. That seemed to be like they was running some dink and dunk with Russell Wilson, which seems to like totally defeat the purpose of having Russell Wilson. He's not the player that he used to be, but he wasn't about to let them play him.
Yeah, the Russell Wilson thing is interesting because his style of play is not one that fits neatly into an offense. And they tried to fit him into an offense and he was making mistakes. And then they tried to like hide him, essentially. And I get it. I wouldn't want to have to pay a quarterback that much money if the goal was to keep him from beating us, but y'all did. And now you're going to have to wait this out. There's no way out of this situation other than patience.
Well, let me ask this question. Sean Payton was willing to hand the keys to Taysom Hill, but Russell Wilson terrifies him. You know what I mean? Like there's something odd about that. Like he demonstrated a certain measure of flexibility when he was in New Orleans, but Russell Wilson terrifies you, number one. Number two, people are asking all these questions about whether or not was it Bill Belichick or was it Tom Brady, and Sean Payton is right here. Like if you want to go down that road in asking these kinds of questions, right? I watched the Patriots damn near make the playoffs with the ghost of Cam Newton, right? We saw them make the playoffs with Mac Jones as a quarterback not that long ago. Sean Payton right here directly in front of us if we got these questions. But what I want to know is, I want to know what Russell Wilson really has to say about this. And I have no idea because none of us have any idea how Russell Wilson actually talks.
Yeah,
we know how he talks and sounds in different places, but we don't know what he actually thinks.
Yeah, we have no idea. And apparently from everybody I talked to who've known him as far back as high school, that's when he became this person. So you had to go real far back to figure out who the real Russell is or who he is at this point. And on Get Up last week, somebody mentioned the idea of him going to Pittsburgh. I can't think of a worse combination of human beings. Mike Tomlin and Sean Payton. I cannot imagine anything worse. Putting those two men in the same building and asking them to work together.
Let me tell you something. I don't really know like much of what Russell Wilson thinks about the world in any sort of way, right? I do know this. in my travels, I can't speak anything about this dude because I don't really know him like that. I mean, that man popped up married to a woman whose middle name was Princess, and that was the last thing that I ever thought was possible. I ain't never gonna pretend like I know this dude. Oh man, I almost said naysayer. I was just like, I'm not gonna pretend. I ain't gonna pretend like I know who this person is. That's part of the problem that he has is people don't really feel like they know him. But I ain't gonna pretend like I know him. But I do know people in my travels who seem to kick it and carry it as he has carried it since I first became aware of him, which was covering him when he was a redshirt freshman at NC State, right? And trafficking in the ways that he has. Somewhere along the way, he determined that this was the best way to do this, right? Somewhere along the way, he decided this was the smoothest way to navigate the world that he lived in. And I find that very often when people have made such decisions, right, and they've decided they're going to kick it how they kick it, and this ain't nothing to say anything about what kind of person we're dealing with, just the ways they managed, how they've decided to traffic through the world. Once they make that decision to do that, there's something that happens, right? It's a different thing for different people, but they get to a place and there's something that happens. And at that moment, whether they realize it or not, their real views on race in America all come out, and they come out like a volcano. They explode. They go all over the place. They bubble over. There's ash. They got to close down the lagoon. Anything can happen. And I'm telling you right now, after they tried to run this on Russell Wilson, he said some things to Sierra that even she could not believe. He didn't know. He had no idea that he harbored these feelings. I remember once where Karl Malone was trying to ask for some money and the Jazz didn't want to give it to him. And Karl Malone was like, I did all the right things and I thought it would pay off and now it didn't. I know where Karl Malone from. I can't imagine what he said when his wife was in another room and he just decided to let it go and say everything that was on his mind in that moment in time. I want that from Russell Wilson so bad. I will remind people of this. I don't know. Did you watch that Louis Armstrong doc? I think I saw it on like Apple Plus or something. Sasha Jenkins did it. Check it out. It's really, really interesting. Like a really interesting look at Louis Armstrong. But the thing with Louis Armstrong was, I see fields of grain. He out there giving out that big old smiling, man. People thought that Louis was Uncle Tom, right? Man, they found out that every night that Louis Armstrong would make tapes, just kind of like an audio journal. And basically he'd go home and he'd smoke weed and he'd make those tapes. And one thing that was very clear in those tapes is that Satchmo had no love for the white man, not even the tiniest bit of love for the white man. Satchmo was just out here doing what he had to do to get that money. But he did not love that white man even the littlest bit. Ain't no telling the way they tried to play Russell. And he is Mr. Do What You Supposed to Do, all of that stuff. Even with this, he didn't leak it out that they tried to play him and put him in that position. He just went out there and good soldiered the whole thing. He is furious, dog. Russell Wilson might show up next year and he gonna be wearing all the Inspired Change gear, all of it.
I imagine that it started with his conversation with Sierra started with, can you believe what these like that had to be the first words of it, because that's, and also like it reminds me of, and I've said this before, that my union experience is it reminds me of quarterbacks. Is quarterbacks think that they're different than the rest of us, that they aren't football players. And my leadership at the union is like, nah, y'all not. Hey, it's gonna come a time y'all need to be with us. When they was in our meetings, like advocating for things that the league wanted and pushing back, like, hey, I know that you're the face of the organization. The owner fly you in his jet sometimes, and he want to talk to you, hold your hand, and you got to say all the right things in the media. But let me tell you something, you one of us. And then eventually, like you mentioned, something happens. And if you notice that Drew Brees was heavily involved in the union, that's because Drew Brees messed up his shoulder in San Diego, and they treat his ass like a football player and not a first-round drafted quarterback. And it happens to all of them at some point. And it's like, nah, it don't matter how good you throw the ball, you still are among the naysayers. And if you grow up playing a different position, or frankly, if you just grow up black, you kind of understand that you cannot behave your way out of being treated a certain way. And it happened to Russ. He's a quarterback and he's black. So I don't know how he stands on all these things, but I know right about now how he feels about the way that the Broncos treated him.
Look, man, Sierra, on one level may have been like, I've been trying to tell you. But the other part, don't forget this. They was trying to get in, like, this was both of their chances to make that turn. Like, when he first got there, this was he was looking at this as the bump into the next level of fame, but also into the next level of American status, which is to say, they was trying to get down with that Walmart money. You know what I'm saying? Like they was just trying, they were moving up. And it didn't go the way that it was supposed to.
All because he ain't throwing enough touchdowns. Had they balled out, we'd be looking at a whole different story. He might have made that transition. He might never would have been confronted with this. So congratulations, Russell, on a rough start or a rough career in Denver. It allowed you to be reminded that you still want us.
Hey, man. And let me tell you another thing that's wild, too. Talk about two things being true at once. Maybe Nathaniel Hackett was really bad at it, and Russell Wilson was cooked. Both of those things appeared to be true at once. Because Sean Payton came in there and talked all that smack about Hackett and then lost. Let's not forget, they did have that game. They lost, right? And this is not to Aaron Rodgers and them. This was to Zach Wilson and them. But it looks like everybody was what everybody thought everybody was. Prize Picks is the most fun you can have by winning up to 25 times your money this football season. And now you can play during basketball season, too. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. Prize Picks is really simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. So make sure you go to prizepicks.com/Bomani and use code Bomani for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/Bomani. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.